The house once owned by country legend Patsy Cline is nestled in the quiet, tree-lined suburb of Madison, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. Built in the 1950s, the modest brick ranch-style home at 815 Nella Drive was where Patsy lived with her husband and children until her untimely death in a plane crash in 1963. In the spring of 2022, the house was purchased by a couple from Austin, Texas. Eric and Lauren Daly, both in their mid-30s. Eric was a music journalist and Lauren a former real estate agent turned podcaster. They had long admired country music's golden era and were stunned when they came across the listing. The house still bore original fixtures from the 1960s, including a pink-tiled bathroom and wood-paneled walls in the den. Patsy's spirit seemed embedded in the place. They saw it as a dream home, a quiet spot with history, character, and soul. During the first few weeks, nothing seemed out of place. They painted, decorated, and tried to maintain the vintage feel. Lauren, a fan of antique preservation, restored an old RCA record player and placed it in the living room under a framed photo of Patsy Cline. She often played Patsy's albums while cleaning, cooking, or relaxing. It gave the house life. But by the second month, things changed. It started with a soft humming sound, sometimes just past midnight. Lauren heard it first while walking to the kitchen. It came from the hallway, a melody barely audible, as if someone were rehearsing an old song under their breath. It disappeared when she turned on the lights. Eric thought it might be plumbing or the AC ducts expanding. But then, one night, while editing an interview at 2 a.m., he heard the unmistakable sound of boots, slow, deliberate steps walking down the hall, even though Lauren was asleep and barefoot in bed. Soon, objects began to shift places. Lauren's grandmother's locket, which sat untouched on a nightstand, was found in the bathroom sink. A vintage lipstick tube from the 1960s, found during renovation and stored in a shadow box, appeared on the edge of the tub one morning. In the den, the record player began spinning by itself but not playing even when unplugged. They began documenting everything. Lauren's podcast shifted toward real-time paranormal investigation. Her following exploded. People sent in theories. One listener, an amateur medium, messaged them saying, "She's not angry. She's just still here, watching, waiting." The most disturbing event happened in early October. Eric was in the bedroom closet organizing winter clothes. He noticed a musty perfume smell, like talcum powder and faded roses. The light bulb in the closet began to flicker. Then it popped. As he stepped back, the mirrored closet door slammed shut behind him, though it had no lock. He pounded on the glass and shouted, but Lauren was outside gardening and heard nothing. For nearly 15 minutes, he was trapped in the dark, breathing in the cloying scent of old perfume, while feeling undeniably a presence standing with him. Silent, still, close. The door eventually opened on its own. Eric began digging into the history of the home. Patsy had reportedly once told a friend that she wrote lyrics in the hallway at night, humming to herself to remember melodies. That hallway, the same one Lauren had heard humming from. The bathroom where the lipstick appeared was the same spot where, according to one book, Patsy had applied makeup before heading to her final show. They contacted a local historian, who confirmed. Many say she never left that house. Not all spirits go out with a bang. Some just linger in love. One night, while playing Sweet Dreams, Lauren fell asleep on the couch. She woke at 3:07 a.m. to a woman's voice softly singing the next verse, not from the speakers, but from the kitchen. The sound of bare feet on linoleum followed. Terrified but moved, Lauren walked to the kitchen and whispered, "Thank you for letting us stay." From that night forward, the humming stopped. The house grew calm. Eric and Lauren still live in the home. They no longer fear it. They speak of Patsy as a kind ghost, a lingering artist who watches over the space where her music once lived. Occasionally, the record player spins on its own, especially on rainy nights. They don't stop it. They listen. The change was gradual, almost respectful, like the house itself was testing their willingness to coexist. After the closet incident, Lauren stopped trying to document every strange occurrence. She still recorded the podcast, but more as a diary than an investigation. Her voice, once analytical and curious, had grown reverent. She didn't want to exploit the haunting. She wanted to understand it. Eric, however, grew more restless. It began one afternoon in early November, as low clouds gathered and the wind turned bitter. Eric was working on a freelance piece about forgotten Nashville recording studios. His laptop sat open on the small mahogany desk he had placed in the front room, a space they had unofficially dubbed the music room. Lauren had insisted they keep it as untouched as possible. The original wooden blinds, the old yellowing wallpaper with a repeating floral motif, even the scuffed linoleum floor. In the corner, standing silently like a museum piece, was an upright piano they'd inherited with the house. It hadn't worked when they moved in, at least, that's what the real estate agent claimed. But when Eric lifted the lid and pressed a key, it produced a fragile, bell-like sound that seemed too pure for something so old. That day, as he typed and sipped his cold coffee, the piano played 2 notes behind him. Not a full chord, just 2, one low, one high. Perfect interval, almost like a call and response. He turned, thinking maybe Lauren had come in. But the hallway was empty. The front door was closed. The air was utterly still. He pressed his palm against the top of the piano. It was warm. The keys, when he touched them again, were colder. Eric didn't tell Lauren about it at first. He didn't want to spook her again, not after she had just started sleeping through the night again. But that evening, after dinner, he returned to the music room alone. He brought with him an old Patsy Cline record, Sentimentally Yours. He placed it on the RCA player, let the needle drop, and sat cross-legged in front of the piano. "You hear?" he asked aloud, feeling foolish. The track began to play. "She's Got You." And at that exact moment, a photo fell from the bookshelf, face down. When Eric turned it over, he felt his mouth go dry. It was the only Polaroid they'd taken the week they moved in. Lauren standing in front of the house, waving. But now, in the print, a soft light blurred the edges around her. Behind the curtain, in the window, was the faintest shape of a woman's face. Pale, unclear, but undeniable. He didn't tell Lauren. By mid-November, the house had grown colder. Not just from the approaching winter. The warmth, the invisible comfort they'd first felt had faded. Lauren noticed it first in the guest room. They'd kept the space mostly empty, save for a double bed and a vanity table. When her sister visited from Dallas, she complained about the room being claustrophobic, even though it had a wide window and received the most morning light. "I swear," her sister said over breakfast, "it's like someone's watching me in there. Every time I tried to sleep, I felt like I needed to apologize." Lauren laughed it off. But a week later, she began avoiding the room too. One Saturday night, Eric went to bed early while Lauren stayed up scrolling on her phone. She wandered into the guest room without thinking, intending to grab a folded blanket from the closet. But the moment she crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was thick, like stepping into a humid summer garage. The faint scent of lavender and cigarette smoke filled her nose, a smell neither she nor Eric used. On the vanity, the mirror was fogged, as if someone had been breathing against it. Her skin erupted in goosebumps, and then she saw it. Written in the condensation of the mirror, in cursive as delicate as lace, was a single word. "Gone." Lauren backed out of the room slowly, never turning her back on the mirror. She didn't tell Eric for days. One cold morning near Thanksgiving, Eric received a package in the mail, no return address. Inside was a vintage concert program from the early 60s, one of Patsy's final tours. Tucked inside the pages was a handwritten note. "She never really left. She loved that house. But she's sad about something. You need to find the den. The old one." It made no sense. The den was one of the first rooms they had restored. Wood paneling, plaid curtains, a worn-in leather armchair. They even hung a replica of the Billboard magazine cover that featured her in 1961. But that night, Eric couldn't sleep. He sat in the armchair, glass of bourbon in hand, and stared at the walls. Something about the room felt wrong, like it had been moved or changed, and the house remembered the original layout. At 3:13 a.m., as he started to drift, the light bulb in the ceiling fan flickered and burned out. Then, Across the room, the corner near the bookshelf went darker than shadow. A dim shape emerged like a negative pulled into form. She stood still, a woman in a long dress, her face hidden by the soft fall of her dark curls. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Eric couldn't breathe. His eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but something else. Grief. He didn't blink. The woman slowly lifted her head. And then, she vanished. The day after the den encounter, Eric didn't say a word to Lauren. Not over breakfast. Not during their walk through the backyard, where they raked up piles of brittle orange leaves in silence. Not even when she asked him gently, cautiously, if something was wrong. He just kept staring at the house. Not in fear. Not quite. More like it had become something new to him overnight. A thing alive. Breathing. Watching. By late afternoon, he found himself back in the garage, where they'd stored most of the boxes from the previous owners. The realtor had said they could throw them out, but Lauren insisted they keep them just in case. She had a reverence for history, especially when it came to homes with legacy. She often said, "It's not trash just because it's forgotten." That day, Eric rummaged through the dust and mildew with purpose. He didn't know what he was looking for until he found it. A heavy, velvet-covered book with cracked binding, tucked in a shallow drawer of an old cedar chest. It smelled of mothballs and smoke. Its corners were worn soft. The front had no title, but when he opened it, the first page held a name in careful, feminine cursive. Virginia Hensley, Patsy's birth name. It was her scrapbook. There were pressed flowers, photos clipped from tour brochures, notes in the margins of old lyrics. He turned the pages slowly, feeling like an intruder inside someone else's memory. One page held a scribbled recipe for chess pie. Another, a lock of auburn hair pinned under a square of wax paper. Halfway through, something caught in his throat. A newspaper clipping, brittle and yellowing, was glued beside a photograph of a small child. The caption read, "Tragedy strikes at home of country star." It detailed a car accident that occurred just a block away from the house in 1961. A young neighbor girl had died. No other outlets mentioned the story, but here it was, documented like a private wound. Eric looked up from the book, and for a moment he swore deep in the garage shadows he saw the figure of the woman again. But she didn't emerge this time. She watched. That night, Lauren had her first dream in months. Not a typical nightmare, not the kind where you wake up gasping. It was slower than that, sadder. In the dream, she stood in the hallway of the house, though it was decades older. The wallpaper was different, a soft, faded peach with hand-painted roses. There were no LED lights, no modern thermostats. Everything smelled like hot irons and powder. A young woman stood at the end of the hall, Patsy, unmistakably. Her eyes were rimmed in eyeliner. Her lips painted a vibrant red, but she wasn't glamorous in that moment. She looked tired, like she had been up too long, like the air itself weighed her down. In her hands, she clutched a torn letter. She looked at Lauren, her eyes locked, but her mouth didn't move. Instead, Lauren felt the message. "Please find it. Please put it back." When Lauren woke up, her pillow was damp with tears. And in the living room, the record player was spinning again, slowly, softly, with no record on the platter. The next morning, Lauren told Eric everything. The dream, the message, the face in the hallway. Eric listened, silent, before standing and walking to the bookshelf in the den. He pulled down the scrapbook, flipping straight to the newspaper clipping. His fingers trembled. "This," he whispered. "She's mourning something." Lauren read the article, then read it again. The child, the street, the year, all of it real. There was no known connection between Patsy and the child. But something about the way the photo was preserved, the small lock of the girl's hair taped into the corner, said otherwise. Eric paced the room, eyes darting to the floor. "She said to put something back," Lauren whispered. "What if it's here? What if the house wants us to find it?" They tore the den apart carefully, not with violence but reverence. Each drawer was emptied. Every vent was checked. But it was Eric who finally knelt near the old coat rack by the back door and ran his fingers along the floor molding. There was a floorboard, slightly loose. He pried it up slowly, and underneath, wrapped in a piece of red handkerchief, was a child's shoe. Tiny, patent leather, scuffed at the toes. Inside the heel was a name, barely legible in pencil. N.E.R. Eric and Lauren sat there in silence for a long time. Neither of them asked how it got there. They both knew it didn't matter anymore. They kept the child's shoe on the kitchen table that night, carefully placed atop a folded linen napkin, as if it might shatter from too much attention. Neither of them ate. Lauren warmed a mug of chamomile tea she never drank. Eric poured bourbon and left the glass untouched. Outside, the wind moved through the skeletal trees with a soft, brittle whisper, like fingertips across piano keys. Inside the house, everything was quiet, unnaturally so. Even the creaks and sighs that old homes made in the night had gone still, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Lauren spoke first. "I think she was hiding it for a reason," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric nodded. "Or protecting it." There was a weight in the air, not malevolent, not hostile, but somber, like grief when it had aged into something quieter. The kind of sorrow that didn't want to hurt anyone, but still needed to be seen. The next morning, Lauren made some calls. She contacted the county archives, the historical society, even an elderly neighbor who had lived 2 doors down since the early 1960s. None remembered the girl named N.E.R., at least not in the public record. But the old woman on Nella Drive had paused on the phone. "I remember a little girl," she said. "She died suddenly, hit by a car. There was some scandal. Folks didn't talk about it much. Something about her parents leaving town. And the Cline woman, she blamed herself. I think they were close. The girl used to bring flowers to her porch. Patsy was the only one who sang at the funeral." The call ended in silence. Lauren stared at the shoe for a long time, then said, "We have to return it." 2 blocks away, tucked behind a line of forgotten homes and overgrown fences, lay a stretch of earth that hadn't been developed, a gentle slope of wild grass, brush, and rustling trees. Once, decades ago, it had been a community lot, used for neighborhood cookouts, children's games, and afternoon gatherings. Now it was little more than a field with no name. According to the archived newspaper clipping, it was where the accident happened. On a gray December afternoon, they walked there, hand in hand, carrying the shoe in the same red handkerchief. Eric had wrapped it carefully, folding each corner with deliberate tenderness, like one would fold a flag. The air was damp with the coming of winter, and the wind carried the smell of wet leaves and distant chimneys. At the edge of the field, Lauren knelt and began to dig with her hands. The soil was soft, cold. She didn't cry, not quite, but her eyes watered as she pressed the shoe into the earth. Eric placed the handkerchief on top, smoothing the edges. He whispered something Lauren never asked what, and they covered it again, piling a small ring of stones over the spot. A quiet marker. They stood there for several minutes. Then they went home. That evening the house felt different. Not lighter, not fully, but settled. The draft in the hallway was gone. The soft perfume smell, once lingering near the guest room, had faded. And for the first time in weeks, the record player didn't move. The air didn't hum. No footsteps clicked across the floorboards. Lauren turned on the light in the den and found the room warmer than before. She sat in the leather chair and let herself sink into the silence. Eric joined her. They didn't say much. There was nothing left to say. But at 2:44 a.m., Lauren woke to music. Soft, distant. It wasn't coming from the RCA player. It wasn't on any playlist. It was a voice. Her voice. Patsy. It echoed faintly from the hallway, just a verse. A single phrase drifting like candle smoke. Sweet dreams of you. No footsteps. No presence. Just the song. Lauren closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." In the morning, the scrapbook was gone from the shelf. In its place was a single photograph, unframed, unmarked. It showed Patsy Cline in the backyard, laughing. Beside her was a little girl holding daisies, her face turned up toward the sun. Eric and Lauren still live on Nella Drive. They don't tell many people what happened. It's not the kind of story others believe. But they keep the photo on their mantle, in a brass frame they found at a flea market. Every spring, Lauren plants daisies in the backyard. Every November, they walk to the field with a small red ribbon and tie it around a tree. Sometimes, in quiet moments when the weather turns or when the wind slips through the curtains, they hear humming in the walls. Not sad, not haunting, just present. And they hum along,